Good morning. Today is Tuesday, July 11th, 2006. I am Dorothy Rotter, and I'm talking with Jack Dygola as part of the Video History Project of the Milwaukee Jewish Historical Society. And let's start out by finding out a little bit about you, your full name.
Jack Dygola.
And when and where were you born, Jack?
I was born April 29th, 1927 in Poland, in a city called Dobrzyn.
Okay, is Dobrzyn still...
Yes, it's still out because I was back. So it's still, it's not a big city, but was a lot of Jewish people lived there.
It had a good-sized Jewish population?
Right.
And were you, before the war, did you have a Jewish life there?
Very much so. My grandfather was a Hasan Shoichet in our town. And so, of course, he had a choir and went to shul every Friday. And my upbringing was very Jewish. I went to Cheder. And as a matter of fact, I speak, read, and write Jewish now.
Jewish or Yiddish or Hebrew?
Yiddish.
Okay. So your education was in Yiddish, not even for your bar mitzvah?
I didn't have a bar mitzvah.
Because?
Because of the war. I got cut in the Holocaust.
Was your name always Dygola? Was it Dygola there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And you were how old when things began to happen in...
Around 11.
Okay. And did you have sisters, brothers?
I had a brother that was 2.5 years younger than me. His name was Shmuel Dygola.
Okay. And just to get some background on your family, you had a brother and your father...
My father died before the war at a very young age, at age 37.
Okay, then that was...
On a heart attack.
Oh, okay. And your mother?
My mother and my brother and I were cut in the war. The war broke. Germans came in 1939.
Okay. And you did what? Let's back up for a moment. What did your father... You talked about your grandfather. What did your father do before he died?
My father was an actor and a singer and played almost every instrument. He finished Conservatory of Music in Moscow.
Okay, so this was an educated...
Very educated,
this
yes.
was not a shtetl family.
No.
This was an educated family. Do you have any musical... Did you inherit any?
Well, maybe a little singing.
Okay.
Because that's what some people say, you sing nice. But I'm a lot musically inclined, and I like all sorts of music.
Okay. How did you survive the war? How did you make it through?
Well, we were surrounded from our hometown at first, and taken on trucks, and we didn't know where they were taking us, and we wound up in a ghetto. It wasn't a ghetto like the Warsaw or Lodz ghetto, but it was a ghetto surrounded with wires and only one entrance. And we were about, mainly my mother's side of the family. My mother had sisters and brothers and nieces and nephews and so on. And we were in this ghetto called Strzegowo. That's where we wound up. and conditions weren't very good. I was taken a few times to labor camp to dig ditches. They came in together and they wanted so many men. So if you walked on the street, they just grabbed you, and without questions. So it was a very scary daily affairs in the ghetto. Luckily, we weren't starving for hunger. There was some food, and until one day, we were in the ghetto close to a year. There was a rumor that our ghetto would be liquidated. There was another ghetto a few miles away that got liquidated a few months ago prior to this rumor, and nobody knows whatever happened to the whole population. The rumor was they took them in the forest and they all got shot. So my mother, being a young widow, because like I said, my father died before the war, 1937, at age 37. With 2 children and some sisters. She had some single sisters and other sisters with nephews. Anyway, to make the story short, one day, 8 of us, my mother, her 2 sisters, my brother and I, and 3 cousins of mine, 3 boys. So there was 8 of us. We decided to escape before they liquidate the ghetto. And they're going to take us somewhere, who knows where. But we had to all be on our own. We couldn't go 8 people. And at that time, this was in 1941, or somewhere in there, we didn't realize, or nobody knew, that the war was going to go on for another almost 4 years. We thought, well, another week or 2 will be all over so we can survive. Now, we all got separated, and we all went our own way. But before we escaped from the ghetto, I got acquainted with somebody Gentile on the other side of the ghetto. So just before we were leaving the ghetto, escaping, I asked the people if they would give me a cross, and I changed my name on my own. Didn't want to be Jack Dygola, even though it doesn't sound Jewish, sounds more Italian. But I changed my name to a strict Catholic boy by the name of Wacław Dulczewski. Strict. Where did I get the name? In my hometown back in Dobrzyn, there was a neighbor, Mrs. Dulczewski, and her son Wacław. When the German army machine gun our hometown and bombed, something happened to Mrs. Dulczewski and Wacław because they never returned to their apartment. So I was thinking I should take his name and be him, and I knew quite a bit about his mother's maiden name and blah, blah, blah. And I became Wacław Dulczewski. Well, so running away from the ghetto, I walked for mainly farmers and little side roads where hardly a car or anybody went by there, and that type of area. And I was hiding out as Wacław Dulczewski, and I was working on farms. But it became tougher as it came and stricter. They wanted all the people that live in that house to be legally registered and their name on the door. If there was somebody extra and the Germans came in to that farm and there was somebody that wasn't on the door, who are you? They right away shot him or hung him or whatever. It was very strict. So this one lady said, I'll take you in. I need somebody to help me on the farm. She had quite a lot of cows, but you have to get registered. And I took a chance. Oh, prior to that, the reason I went through that winter, that first winter, and I froze my hands completely. And it looked like this was going to be the end because my fingers were going to fall off. They were black and blue, and I couldn't move. And so I was walking down the river one afternoon, and like if somebody in back of me tells me, go up to there was a lady washing clothes on a whatever you called it,
Washboard.
On a washboard. And like to tell her. Well, I didn't have to tell her. When I came close to her and she looked, she already knew. But I did tell her. That's the first person
You told her what, Jack?
that I am Jack Dygola and I am Jew. And she said, I want you to go in the field and wait till it gets very dark, and I'll come and get you and take you into my house so nobody can see us, that I'm bringing a stranger or whatever. And she saved my life because she was making butter and took it in, and there was 12 kilometers to a city called Sherpt. She was taking in the butter on black market and got me some kind of salve. I don't know the name of it, but anyway, I was in her house for close to 3 months, healing. She healed my hands every day, and thanks to her that I became well enough. And that's where I went across this river. There was a little river, that same river where I met her, because she told me there was a widow that's got a big farm, and I can go there and maybe she'll hire me. Of course, there was no pay or anything. You were happy that you had a roof over your head and some food. So she says to me, oh, yes, I could use you, but we have to put your name on the... And I wouldn't dare tell her who I was. I was back to Warsaw-Dolczewski. No matter who questioned me and who was good, that was it. And I spoke Polish fluent, because I also went to a Polish school besides Haida before the war. And we took the horse and wagon and went into a German office, and I was worried that I'm going to give away on my face because I could understand when they... But thank God I told them what happened, that when it was bombed, my mother and I got separated, and I could never find her, and I've been wondering, these people need help. They have to give so much to the German army, eggs and butter and meats and pigs, and there were... So she needs for me to help her work on with all of that. And they believed the whole story. And they put me, so I was legally with my name, Václav Dolchevsky, at this lady's house.
She did not know you.
She would have, they were happened to be so anti-Semitic. At every supper or dinner, there were all the jokes about Jews, and I had to also say similar thing. But I was very careful with my crossing myself before the meal and this. So she used to say she had a daughter about my age and 2 sons. But the sons were taken to dig ditches. The Germans took them away. That's why the farm was being neglected. So she needed somebody to help. She used to tell her daughter, look at Václav. He comes from a good religious Catholic home, and so on. I didn't forget. But I used to sleep above the horse. The horses were downstairs, and upstairs was hay and a ladder and stables. And above the stable. Until one night, there's a flashlight in my face in the middle of the night. So I thought that was the end. Somebody had the Germans check on me, and that was it. And it was dark. It was the middle of the night with the flashlight, and there was speaking Polish. But there were a lot of Germans that were speaking Polish too. And they took me downstairs, and I turn around, I take a look, and I recognize one of the guys. He was a Jewish guy in a uniform. He was a policeman in the ghetto that I was. The ghetto had Jewish police inside the ghetto. The German came in, and he says, I want 30 guys. It was up to the Jewish policeman to give him what they wanted. So I recognized this one guy, so I started talking with him, and he explained to me that they're the Partisans. They're not. And the first thing he asked me, how am I being treated here? I says, fine, except that with all they were very anti-Semitic. They said, you're coming with us. And that's how I went with the Partisans. And, but I was too young for a weapon. I just went with them. And this was, well, in 44, I think. And I was with them for a few months, and then things were starting to change. There were the underground and the Partisans. They used to mine railway tracks and shoot at Germans if they were on a motorcycle or in a car. So they were attacking them. So it was a little bit of a freedom. But being with the Partisans, I was pretty good off, because they went into a farm and they wanted anything they wanted. He better give it to them or else. Until one day, there was a lot of noise. We were maybe 2 kilometers from a main road at one particular time. And there was a lot of noise. We thought the Germans were escaping. And it was the Russian army. That's how I got freed by the Russian army in 1945, 44, 45, somewhere in there. And So I was freed, and I went back to my hometown.
By that time, the war was over?
The war was not quite over yet, but the part that we were, it took a little bit longer to Berlin, but it was closing. And went back to my hometown, and nobody was there, not a one Jew, nothing. So I ran into these were all coincidental things. Ran into a Polish captain, a high rank soldier, and I recognized him. There was David Pieniak. He used to have a drugstore not far in my hometown. And he knew my father, they were friends.
He was not Jewish.
He was Jewish,
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And he told me to go to Warsaw, that there is already places for orphans, because I said I can't find my brother, and I can't find my mother, can't find my cousins, and my aunts that we escaped together, nobody. Well, there was no telephones and there was no communication. So I went to Warsaw and the orphanage there, and it was funny. You walk into a place, and there was nothing but names on the wall. They were already a week before or 3 days before I arrived. There were people the same way coming and looking, so everybody put their name on the wall. Maybe they recognize. That's how some people found a cousin or a brother or somebody. Well, I didn't, but I did put my name. Then I was there for maybe a couple months, and they told me, well, by then the war was over, that there is already in Lodz a kibbutz with some Israelis in charge, a couple guys, and they're forming, and that's where I should go. So, and I had a little upbringing about Israel when I was a child in my hometown. I knew about Jabotinsky and about Trumpeldor, and I knew it, but it was mainly for fun. For example, 1 month I could be in Beitar, which is Jabotinsky, and the next month Hashomer HaTzair, which was completely different. But to me, the politics and the didn't matter. It's where the nicer uniform and where the girls were.
Not much different than here.
Right. Well, anyway, so I was in Lodz, and there was about close to 80 orphans, boys and girls. And we lived in one house and were learning Hebrew a little bit, and learning about the life. There was no Israel yet, but we are being prepared to go. That's where we were going. As a matter of fact, one transport of 10 or 12 kids from our group left, and so on. And then again, I was in charge mainly of entertainment in Lodz. I used to get the movie tickets and travel, whatever arrangements. So I became a Fabrente Chalutz. There was no way anywhere else. If somebody would hand me a visa to go to New York, I would hit him. I wouldn't want any part. The only place for me to go is to Palestine.
So, you're not in Palestine?
No. The reason he is all coincidental. I was going to buy something, and I had to take a train. No. I got to back up a little bit. From Lodz, my turn came also to leave. So we were leaving as Greeks into Germany, crossing the border. Well, once we're in Germany, we become German Jews, returning home. So we're German citizens, you know. It was all arranged by not just the two Israelis, but some of the leaders that I don't want to bring up some of their names. Well, some Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. I knew a guy by the name of Antek. Was his nickname, and Yitzhak something. He was in Israel. He was a Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. I forgot his last name. Anyway, my turn came, and I arrived in Germany, in a kibbutz. And we were going to continue from there. We're going to go through mountains in Italy, and somewhere they were telling us how and what will come to the destination where we're supposed to be. So one day I'm on the railway station, and there's American soldiers. There's the part of Germany where I was on the American zone near Munich. And there were two soldiers speaking Yiddish on the railway station. So I walked up. I said, "Where are you from?" They said, "From Brooklyn." I said, "Oh, then you know my son, my Tante Sarah Neumann." They looked at me like I was crazy. You see, in my hometown in Dobrzyn, if somebody would say to you, of course, because everybody knew everybody, and most of the people were related too. So I figured this, when they come from Brooklyn, they got to know my my Aunt Sarah Neumann. It was my father's sister. They said, they laughed. They said, "Do you know how many Neumanns are in Brooklyn?" Hundreds, maybe more. "But where are you staying? Give us your address." And we correspond with our parents in Brooklyn. So we mention your name and your Tante Sarah Neumann, and you never know. To make the story short, I lived, by the way, in the kibbutz in Landsberg. And Landsberg is a very popular town, not very big, but it's popular because Hitler wrote Mein Kampf in Landsberg. He was in the jail that I used to walk by to my kibbutz up the mountain. See, the kibbutz was taken out, took over a school in Landsberg, and it was on top of the hill. And on the other side of the street was the jail where Hitler was put in the early 30s, 32, 31, before he became, and that's where he wrote Mein Kampf. I mean, that's the connection with Landsberg. Well, my connection was that about a month or 5 weeks later, I received a letter from Sarah Neumann.
Your aunt.
My aunt, my father says, "So now I got a relative." Well, she put in a $5 bill. Well, $5 for me was like I became a millionaire. Besides being in a kibbutz, you can't take that $5 and put it in your pocket. You're supposed to share it. Everything is together, collective, you know. Well, I didn't. I put it so the letters she used to write to me, and I used to get them like 3-4 letters a week, is mainly that I should not go to Palestine because I'll get killed by the Arabs. After surviving, and she kept on saying, my brother, which was your father, was the only boy in the family. And you wrote me in one of the letters that your brother disappeared, so you're the only one. And I wanted the Dygola name to go on.
So that's what brought you to the U.S.?
Well, not quite, but she twisted my chalutz, being a verbrannte chalutz, that there was no way I would go anywhere else. This relative, my tante, switched a little bit in my mind, which the kibbutz, without anybody's knowledge, I went into Munich to American consul, and I applied for American citizenship, American visa. The building where the American consul was, there was also a Canadian consul across the hall on the other side, with an office girl, with a door open. So every time when I went to Munich, which was very close from Landsberg to Munich, at 20 minutes to ride by streetcar. And I used to go and look if my name was on the list. If your name was on the list, you go for a physical, and before you know, you're on a boat to America to learn. Well, so I got acquainted with the office girl from the Canadian consul. So, your name on there? No, not yet. I'll be back in 3 days, and so on. I became very anxious. One day I walked by, and she says, oh, boy, you know, you might wait on the Polish Quarter another year. Who knows how long. The Jewish Congress of Canada, with the Samuel Bronfman at the head, is requesting for 500, they're sponsoring 500 orphans. If you want to go to Canada, I'll put you the first one on the list. You can emigrate. To make the story short, 3 weeks later, I was on a big ship, Marine Shark, on the way to Canada. And that's how I told my Aunt Sarah Neumann that that's where I'm going, and she was pleased. And I arrived in Halifax. There were representatives on the boat from Germany, from Bremerhaven, to guide us, to chaperone us, and every 500 kids on the ship. So, but there were representatives from Jewish Congress, Canadian Jewish Congress. And when we arrived in Halifax, they had a list of you go to Winnipeg, you go to Toronto, and you go to Montreal. Well, I wound up in Montreal.
And you had no family in Montreal?
I had no family in Montreal or anybody, just us kids became a family.
Okay, but you found family. And I want to be sure to get to how
to
you
the
found your family.
Okay. In Montreal, in Canada, I was learning to be a furrier. I was told this is a good trade to be fur business. This was in 1948. And so I was living already. I had a room with a family by the name of Fogelbaums. in the Jewish neighborhoods. There was a YMHA,
Was there a synagogue, a religious
synagogues.
And were you going to?
I was going to synagogues with, with the families. And was becoming, I applied for my first Canadian citizen papers. And I used to read the forwards because my English was, and there was all sorts of stories about my broken English, the things I used to say. But anyway, I was learning my trade also with a Jewish furrier by the name of Tock, T-O-C-K. And well, everything was pretty good. And one day, my friend was adopted by a Jewish family. They had a summer home in the Laurentian Mountains, which is about 60 kilometers from Montreal. And a lot of Jews used to go there for the weekend. So I was invited, being a good friend of the guy that was adopted by this Jewish family. This one weekend he couldn't go, and I went along. They came, picked me up, and I went there. And no more, this was Friday, and Saturday I get a phone call from my friend. He says, I'm reading the forwards, the Jewish forwards, and at that time it was only in Yiddish. And it says, Eva Dygola, living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I break down every time. Is looking for anybody. She had no idea if it was me, my brother, my cousins, her sisters, from the ones that escaped from the ghetto. Because the ones that remained, we know what happened to them. But from the ones that spread out and escaped, she wanted to, well, she survived, well, I found out later, but anyway, it says looking for anybody from her family. And then, of course, I went right back to Montreal, and we got on the phone, and I called, and of course it was my mother, and I don't want to tell you. And she told me how she survived after she escaped from the ghetto. She was a priest, a friend of hers that she went to school with. Mother that was isolated, there were no roads to get to her house. The son took my mother there after she contacted him. And she was there at this one place all through the war. And after she survived, she couldn't find anybody. She had a sister in Milwaukee.
She had a sister in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Right. And her sister sent an affidavit and brought her to Milwaukee.
The sister had come here before the war.
Way before, at age 18 or something. I didn't know she existed. Anyway, it wasn't that easy then to bring me over from Canada to the States. I was still underage. I was 20, I think. Well, 21. But anyway, my mother would try to different places and different organizations to help her to find a sponsor to bring me over to reunite. She finally found Harry Bragarnik. Somebody told her that he is bringing people, helping out. And that's how he signed an affidavit and a sponsorship, and he sent me I went to the American consul in Canada, in Montreal, and everything was okay, and that's how I came to Milwaukee.
And when you came to Milwaukee, did you start working? Did you have a job?
Well, when I came to Milwaukee, first thing there were reporters and photographers, and you name it.
You were a celebrity.
I was on the first page of the journal, on a Sunday journal, mother and son reunited after pictures. I have it at home. I have the pictures and the articles. And that's how I arrived in Milwaukee. I had a reunion with my mother. And then we rented a little place on 15th and Fleet, I think it was, at that time, a little apartment, my mother and I. Well, she wanted me to continue my education. I had very little education because when the war broke out, I was in grade school. When it ended, I never continued any other, just self-taught reading and so on. So I started a vocational school, and it didn't last a week. I didn't have the patience to sit behind the desk with a pencil and paper to do this after what I went through as a little kid by myself. So the article in the paper also said that I was learning to be a furrier. So all of a sudden I'm being contacted by a guy by the name of Irv Korn. He used to live on Morris Boulevard. He had a fur shop called Buren's Fur in Racine. So he traveled every day to Racine, but he hired me to help him in the fur, whatever, in the fur business. And after the season got slower, and he said he didn't need me anymore. What else is new? Anyway, so that was a bad experience. My mother and I got along very fine, and then one day I come home from the Eagles ballroom dancing, because I used to love music and dancing, and I was pretty good at it. So
that's not where you met your wife. We'll get to
no.
that.
And I come home one morning, one night, and she says, guess what? I bought a store, bought a grocery store. Well, I was very upset. A little neighborhood grocery store, I'll be worse than in a jail. The door is open, but you can't leave. You can't, and you gotta keep open Saturdays and Sundays and holidays. Why did you do that? It's okay for you, but not for me. I'm in the 20s. I'm gonna be in the grocery. Well, we lived through horrible things. We're the only ones left, you know, like, well, anyway, I got to meet my aunt and some cousins. And we were in the grocery business.
Now, were you, at that point, Jack, were you involved in any way with the Jewish community?
Oh yes, I was involved with the Jewish Center. As a matter of fact, on Milwaukee Street yet. At that time, for sure. And then when they built here on Prospect.
Were you members of a synagogue?
No.
Okay. Not at that point.
No. And So in the grocery business, and I used to come to the Jewish Center, and I used to know a lot of Jewish people. And one day, from the Jewish Center, I was told that everybody was gathering for ice cream and coffee at the, forgot the name of the restaurant.
Where was it, Jack?
It was near Farwell, the drugstore on a site that everybody from the Jewish Center used to go.
Oriental Drugs.
But not at the Oriental Drugs. That restaurant that was along
the Ivanhoe.
the Ivanhoe. That's it. So, but before that, I was being nudged about going on a blind date, and this is where I'm coming to, where I met my wife. And I refused to going to a blind date. Oh, this one nice girl who just came from Madison, she just graduated from college. I want you to meet her. She's a friend of mine. And this was Dr. Sabatsky's daughter, Sherry, and Bill Lasky. They were a team. And Bill Lasky was from Georgia, Savannah. And we became friends. We played ping pong at the Jewish Center. And he says, come on, Jack, well, it won't hurt you when I said no. So we stopped at the Ivanhoe, and sure enough, this girl I was supposed to have a blind date is sitting there, and I'm being introduced. And this was Renee Guten. Well, I didn't know at that time the Gutens had a deli on 49th Center. And, but anyway, I sat down, we got to talk, and we exchanged phone numbers, address, and she says, by the way, I'm going next Sunday to Madison. I says, oh, I've never been in Madison. She says, I have a car, my own car. Wow. Nice Jewish girl with a car for me. For me, a greenhorn, it was something special. And we went to Madison, and I liked her attitudes towards all sorts of things, that I made a date right away for the following week. And to make the story short, we dated for almost a year, and we got engaged. And we got married in 1958, October 19th, at the Astor Hotel. And that's how I became study Milwaukee. And then 2 years later, our first son was born, Jeff. And 4 years later, my second son was born, Sean. Sean is actually Shmuel, named after my brother.
You never found any record of your brother?
You know, a rumor about that the Germans took him away. They did find him.
And at that point, you lived where with your two children now?
Oh, we lived on 90th Court, and then we bought a little house on 73rd near Congress. And accidentally, my mother used to go to Israel. She had some cousins there. And one time while my two kids were born already, she went to Israel, met a man, And she married him and brought him over here. Except he didn't want to do a thing, not help her in the store. She still had the grocery store. And we became two families when I got married. And the little neighborhood grocery store couldn't support my family and my mother. So accidentally, I fell into somebody that was in the insurance business. And he says to me, he just being promoted to the manager of the Milwaukee district. He says, "Oh, I need a guy like you." That was Marty Friedman, his name. And he hired me in the insurance business. Well, thanks to my wife, I passed the test because that was my only worry, my own knowledge of English. How am I going to go for an insurance test and pass it? Never. Well, she used common sense and she helped me with it. And to make the story short, I passed with no problem. And later I found out that some college graduate guys couldn't pass the test. I never went to high school even. But anyway, some of it was luck and some common sense. And most of it was my wife helping me with the test. And didn't take me long. I caught on to the insurance business. That about 6 months later, I was the top agent with the company in the district here in Milwaukee. And the company offered a lot of trips that you had to qualify, to Hawaii, to New Orleans, to Las Vegas. I made every single one of them. Oh, my wife made sure that I make every single one of them. Anyway, so, as the kids were growing, getting in a few years, we said we need to belong to a temple. Oh, so we belonged first to still being on the west side. We belonged to Rabbi Reichman, Menorah? No, not Menorah. You're right.
No, Hamid Chicago. Is that?
That's the cemetery. The temple was. Right.
On Reichman's? Oh, Reichman.
Reichman,
Okay.
right. So we belonged there, and the kids went to school there, and to Sunday school, and they learned Hebrew, and because later on they went to the Hebrew school. There was a school somewhere on Good Hope Road, was it? Brown Deer, Good Hope. A big building, a school they were learning Hebrew. Well, anyway. And and then accidentally, as the things went on, we decided that we're going to move from 73rd Street because of the kids' education, and they found out about Nicolay High School and stuff like that. So we found a house also accidentally in Fox Point, which at present we still live there. I've been living there for 38, 39 years, maybe more. And the kids, so that's why we joined Emmanuel when we moved to Fox Point. We had some friends that belonged, and we went a few times for some functions. We liked the rabbi and the president of the temple. And seemed to be very friendly, and it wasn't really my cup of tea, coming from a Chazan Shoichet in my hometown, and going to Cheder and being religious, but things changed. So I like the tradition, and that's where we belong. We still belong to Emmanuel.
And your children were educated there, had bar mitzvahs,
The both of them had bar mitzvahs at Emmanuel,
which you never had. Yeah.
which I never had. But the rabbi mentioned that on the bima about me not having a bar mitzvah and during the ceremony of my sons. So, yes, they were educated. As a matter of fact, Shannon knows more, quite a bit of Hebrew, and yeah. So what else?
In terms of the Jewish community in Milwaukee, you've really gotten yourself well into the Jewish community.
Oh,
in
yes.
Milwaukee, your wife is a member of a well-known family in Milwaukee.
Right.
And so your friends, your relationships.
Are very well good and very Jewish. We're invited, and we get invited to all the bar mitzvahs and chasanas and parties. So my sons, well, one became an optometrist. The other one is still finding himself, the older one. But I have 3 lovely grandchildren. One has 2, the younger one, and the older one has 1. I should name him at least, right?
Absolutely.
Scarlett, Dygola, and Lior, and Margea, Dygola. That's my 3 granddaughters.
They did not stay in Milwaukee.
No.
They're in, where are they?
And Skokie. And they are being educated at Sarah, what's the name of the Jewish schools? They have 2 of them.
I don't know, but they're at a Jewish day school.
The Jewish Day School, you're right. Both of them.
And they have a very, live very traditional Jewish life.
Oh, yes, my youngest son keeps kosher in the house.
So they're carrying on your tradition.
All right.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to tell us about yourself that you haven't, that we've missed? And I think we have.
Well, I just hope I can continue for a little while yet, enjoy life, because I did miss a lot of years. My best years of my life, for education and so on, I missed everything. And but it turned out pretty good, and I hope it will continue for a little while yet.
We hope so too, Jay.
Yeah.